Thank you, Nada. Thank you for that kind introduction. Thank you for all the work you put into this gathering, and it's wonderful to look out at this room. Thank you, Andrew, for your leadership. And to everybody who's been part of bringing us together today, because we need you in our country now more than ever. Because all of you know that pursuing our interests and promoting our values don't have to be in conflict, that indeed they go hand in hand. Supporting democracy, fundamental freedoms, human rights, and the rule of law is not just the right thing to do. It makes us stronger, and it serves our interest if we're consistent and we stick with it. And that is the key, because a values-based policy, foreign policy, requires not only practicing those values here at home, which is essential, but also applying them consistently overseas. And right now, the Trump administration is attacking those foundations of our strength, both here at home and abroad. Your motto is foreign policy begins at home. And I agree, because America cannot lead effectively abroad if we are weak here at home. So let's quickly look at what's happening here at home, and make no mistake, we are facing a full-fledged assault on our democracy, on our Constitution, and the rule of law. The Trump administration is weaponizing the Department of Justice to go after their political adversaries. There are huge banners of Trump's face hanging on the Department of Justice. They are using government power to crack down on free speech and flagrantly violating constitutional due process rights, like they did in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was snatched off the streets of Maryland a little over a year ago and disappeared to a gulag in El Salvador until we brought him back. Thank you. Now, last year, when the Supreme Court ordered Trump to help facilitate his returns, they ignored him, and he was asked whether he needed to uphold the Constitution. His reply, I don't know, from the President of the United States. His administration is running roughshod over the separation of powers, aided and abetted by a rubber stamp Republican Party. They've completely surrendered their constitutional duties to the dear leader. I was on Meet the Press yesterday, just after Lindsey Graham was on, and he very boastfully said, we are the party of Trump. It is a cult. And nowhere has their surrender been more clear or destructive than giving Donald Trump free rein to wage war against Iran without requiring congressional approval. Trump and his billionaire cabinet either don't understand or don't care that the principles enshrined in our Constitution have been a foundation of our strength and our prosperity. Our system of ordered liberty creates stability, trust, and accountability that allows innovation, investment, free enterprise, and civic participation to thrive. That's part of the DNA of the structure of our government, and that is why the United States has been a beacon for talented people from around the world to come as students or others to study, to build businesses, to conduct scientific research, and to embrace the American dream. Driving them away only weakens us here at home. We need an immigration system that both serves American interests and reflects our values. We see it every day that Donald Trump wants to snuff out the torch on Lady Liberty. And he does this while he is stuffing his own pockets. Republicans have looked away as he's turned the Oval Office into a corrupt pay-to-play casino, enriching himself and his family and his billionaire buddies at the expense of all of you and at the expense of our national security interests, as we saw when they went ahead and sent very sensitive high-end technologies to the UAE after the royal family invested in the Trump family stablecoin scheme. That's just one of many examples. And while he's raking in these profits from his crypto schemes, his administration is slashing vital public investments in science and innovation. They're hollowing out the Department of Education. All of this weakens us at home and our ability to compete globally, particularly against China, which is investing huge sums in AI, semiconductors, quantum computing, and clean energy technologies. They're essentially copying the previous American model of big investment in the science and the future. Now, it's important that we all understand this connection. Those who don't care about upholding our values here at home certainly don't care about supporting democracies and human rights abroad. So it's not surprising that if you look at the administration's national security strategy, it abandons those principles entirely in favor of a might makes right manifesto. If you haven't read it, take a look at it. Not surprisingly, dictators around the world have welcomed this shift. Putin could not be happier that Trump continues to throw the Ukrainian people under the bus. And Xi is taking notes as he trains his eye on Taiwan. In Beijing, we all saw Trump oozed compliments at Xi, but came away with nothing, at least nothing more than ballroom envy. I don't know if you saw those comments. And the real deals are going to be cut between Xi and Putin when Putin arrives tomorrow in China. So while Xi and Putin are smiling, our allies are stunned, as Andrew indicated. Stunned that Trump has talked about invading Greenland. Stunned that he has demeaned their contributions to the war in Afghanistan, where NATO first time invoked the article of our collective defense. That he's engaged in an arbitrary tariff war against them. That the United States of America, the main architect of the post-World War II rules-based order, is now the arsonist burning it down. And it's not just bluster. Trump has blown up boats and murdered people in the Caribbean. He kidnapped Maduro to seize Venezuelan oil. His blockade of Cuba is hurting its people far more than the regime. And the reckless and illegal war in Iran has predictably closed the Strait of Hormuz and led to an even more hardline leadership. It is a war that, in addition to being illegal, is making us less safe and worse off. Now look, no one in this room or in this country or the world doubts that our military is strong, and that's important. Yes, we can sink Iranian ships, but my goodness, we should have learned. We should have learned in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Vietnam, and other wars that tactical success on the battlefield often does not translate into strategic victory. We cannot achieve our goals with military might alone. President Obama understood that when he negotiated the JCPOA. And this organization understands that. You understand that the use of force should be the last resort to protect vital national interests, and you understand that American strength has flowed not only from the power of our military, but from the power of our example. I saw that firsthand growing up in a Foreign Service family, as was mentioned. I remember distinctly traveling with my parents to a remote village in Sri Lanka. We walked into the modest home of the head of the village, and hanging on the wall was a portrait of President John F. Kennedy. Now, why was it there halfway around the world in a remote village? Because to them, America stood for something larger than just our definition or someone's definition of narrow interest. We stood for something bigger. America was the country that had sent the Peace Corps, sent volunteers to help build wells and sanitation systems. And so America represented opportunity and partnership and, yes, hope. That kind of moral credibility matters. The creative use of diplomacy matters. Colin Powell popularized the 3Ds. Defense, yes, but also diplomacy and development. Political scientists call it soft power, but there's nothing soft about the ability to inspire people, to build supportive alliances, to shape international norms, and make other countries and their peoples want to align themselves with democratic values and the rule of law. And the Trump administration is destroying that power by attacking the example of our democracy here at home. We know we're constantly in motion building a more perfect union, but when you actually destroy that example, you, of course, undermine us in the world. And he's also destroying the tools that we need to apply that power around the world. Elon Musk and his Doge boys put USA into the wood chipper. We have seen Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff completely undermine the credibility of our diplomacy when by day they negotiate with the same foreign leaders who by night are cutting lucrative private deals with them or their family members. And perhaps most insidious has been the messages that Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio communicated in back-to-back Munich conferences. And I urge you to read between the lines of their statements, because sometimes it's explicit, sometimes it's implicit, but both, in different tones, argued that the Atlantic Alliance was based not on core values that bind us together, but on a common heritage of blood and soil. And it's really sick to see Rubio infuse that approach into our refugee policy. This year, the United States set a record low cap of 7,500 refugees. But here's the kicker. 99% of those slots have been filled by white South Africans, by Afrikaners. So Trump's abandonment of American values and his decision to start illegal wars has done enormous damage to our standing around the world. Most recent surveys show that China has far eclipsed us in terms of being perceived as the stable partner. And it's important to understand that this is not just a high school popularity test, because it has a direct bearing on our ability to influence events around the world. So, as Andrew said, the question, of course, for all of us is, where do we go from here? How do we confront and reverse the damage Trump is doing to our country at home and abroad? And what kind of better future do we build together? First and foremost, we must, in this moment, resist the ongoing attacks on democracy and the rule of law here at home. The people of Minneapolis have shown us the way. Folks showing up for No King's Day have shown us the way. It also includes winning a majority in the 2026 congressional midterms. But as we look beyond the midterms to 2028, we cannot, as Andrew said, simply return to the pre-Trump status quo. Yes, we're going to have to get to work immediately, reversing the damage done, and there's a lot of repair work we have to do. But it will not be enough to say to the American people, we just want to go back and repair that harm. We have to put together a very clear vision of where we will go, both in terms of our domestic policy and our foreign policy, and as you all know, they are connected. So here at home, we have to revamp a system that our fellow Americans increasingly understand is hardwired in favor of the already wealthy and the already powerful, who use that power to hardwire it even further. Trump exploited. He effectively exploited that deep satisfaction with the system back in 2024, but he has made it even worse much worse. But we must be clear we will design an economy with more shared prosperity, and end a tax system that's rigged in favor of those who make money off of money over those who earn a paycheck through hard work. And all of this will become increasingly urgent in the era of AI. And we need a plan to deal with that. And we need to make big polluters, not everyday people, pay to mitigate the harm caused by climate change, just like we need to make the biggest companies and the richest companies in the world pay for their data centers, not all of you as consumers. Now, as we look to 2028, we need to make sure that we have a foreign policy that first and foremost is designed to meet the needs of American workers and the middle class, not the Davos class. The theme for this year's Leadership Summit is strong, principled leadership, which is a critical message at this moment in our history. The Trump administration has done enormous damage to our standing by attacking those foundational American principles at home and rejecting their important role in our foreign policy. But we have to acknowledge that the Biden administration, to my view, failed to effectively advance those values in a consistent and credible manner. And that was especially true in the Middle East. Now, this is a messy world, and we will always fall short of applying our principles in a completely uniform way. I get that. As I said, I grew up in a foreign service family. But when the gap between our rhetoric and our reality becomes a canyon, we lose credibility. And that does make us less effective. There are consequences to that. Since 2001, the United States has cycled through one Middle East crisis after another. I don't need to go through all of them with you. While generations of Americans have been asked to shoulder the costs. Service members deployed, lives lost, trillions of dollars spent, hundreds of thousands of civilians killed, and years of time and resources toward wars that made the region more unstable. That history should teach us an important lesson. We cannot ignore the root causes of instability. And nowhere have the failures of the past been more clear than the longstanding Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Long before the war in Gaza, America's one-sided approach has deepened the perception that the United States applies one standard of international law to adversaries and another to friends. I vividly recall a meeting in 2023, in fact, a series of meetings with foreign ministers from key countries in the global south, where we urged them to stand with the United States in defending national law and condemning the illegal Russian occupation of Ukraine, both in their public statements and voting at the UN. Their response, they looked right back at us and said, when will the United States do something to end the Israeli occupation of the West Bank? It was a fair question. President Biden was absolutely right to travel to Israel in solidarity after the October 7th horrific Hamas attacks. But the Netanyahu's response went far beyond targeting Hamas to applying collective punishment on all the Palestinians of Gaza. And American weapons have been used to devastate the population, destroy the Strip, and deepen the occupation of the West Bank, in violation of American and international law. And many Americans have been asking why their tax dollars are being used to buy and transfer these weapons. Congress has been in a bubble for too long, but that is finally beginning to change. 40 Democratic senators recently voted to block the transfer of certain military equipment to the Netanyahu government, compared to only compared to only 15 of us in April of last year. Used to be very lonely. It's getting a little less lonely. You know, American taxpayer support should never be unconditional. I mean, think about that statement. It should not be unconditional. It should depend on whether the government receiving that support is taking actions that are aligned with American law, with American policy, and American values. A pretty simple test. In the coming weeks, I will lay out what I believe is a strategy that both ensures Israel's security and the rights of the Palestinian people. The time is long overdue for principled American leadership. And the broader lesson is simple. American foreign policy cannot succeed if we abandon our values whenever those values become inconvenient, wherever that may be. China and Russia are eager to portray the United States as two-faced, that we cynically call for human rights and freedom only as a political cudgel against our adversaries, but fail to apply those standards to our friends and partners. Indeed, during the Biden administration, public surveys showed that large majorities in many countries, particularly in the global south, strongly disapproved of Biden's handling of the war in Gaza. They saw the gap between our words and our deeds. And that loss of credibility weakens our hand, not only in the Middle East, but around the world. That gap has real-world consequences in our ability to effectively pursue our foreign policy. We can strengthen our hand only through principled leadership that aligns our actions and our words. The future of American leadership will be determined by whether people around the world still believe America stands for something bigger than itself, whether we stand for universal values. As President Dwight Eisenhower said in his first inaugural address, and I quote, "We are called as a people to give testimony in the sight of the world to our faith that the future belongs to the free, to the ideas that make us strong here at home, and when we incorporate them in our foreign policy, the ideas that make us stronger around the world." And when I say stronger, ability to influence events to the benefit of the American people, to the middle class, to American workers. And so it is time now to give testimony again, both with our words and with our actions, as Foreign Policy for America says, with principled leadership. Thank all of you for being part of that mission. Thank you.